Yeah, you're procrastinating, but not because you're lazy. You're actually just trying to save yourself. Let me explain. There's no reason to blame yourself for lack of discipline, laziness, or poor judgment, because the problem isn't in any of those. And it's not about the delay, but about the avoidance of emotional discomfort. And precisely this makes procrastination not only the motivational, but also a societal and evolutionary problem. So, what's the problem itself? For Leonardo da Vinci, it took 16 years to finish the Mona Lisa. For Victor Hugo, he had to work his goals away to finish the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and 95% of modern students report problems with procrastination, with the deadlines being as only motivator to finish the assignments in time. Up to 95% of people admit to procrastinating, and 20% do it chronically. Procrastination is directly linked to higher stress, poor health, and lower income. Students who regularly procrastinate report higher levels of anxiety and depression. But procrastination isn't new. Even the ancient Greeks had a word for it, akrasia. It's acting against your better judgment. Even Socrates asked, if you know what's good for you, why don't you do it? We've been wrestling with this disconnect for over 2 millennia. But in modern society, this phenomena has eventually mutated. We see the perfect storm, because modern platforms like TikTok and YouTube are literally engineered to maximize the algorithmic procrastination, meaning that they value reward schedules like slot machines just to keep users hooked, and this way they turn procrastination from a personal quirk into much more profitable business model. And it's not longer about failing to write a letter or repair a car. It's a chronic delay of emails or projects, life decisions. 20% of chronically procrastinating adults are literally costing economies billions in lost productivity. Procrastination can reduce life satisfaction by up to 40%, and the average person spends 55 days in a year procrastinating. It's almost 2 months lost. A 2014 study in University of Colorado Boulder actually reported that procrastination was a heritable trait, and the one closely linked with impulsivity. There is an obvious assumption that the procrastination was clearly evolutionary favored in our ancestors, considering that it was extremely effective for outcompeting in the rule of 4F, to fight, flight, feed, and reproduce. Unfortunately, it's not so much about preparing a quarterly feedback to your boss, but anyhow, they overlap with this evolution of towers. Robert Sapolsky actually puts it quite beautifully. Our brain is like a temporal contradiction. We're wired for an immediate reward, but we've also evolved the frontal cortex, responsible for long-term planning and emotional control. But anytime you procrastinate, this very part of the brain gets overruled by the limbic system. That's an older evolutionary advantage, and this part is responsible for discomfort, the feeling of fear and avoidance. So whenever you interact with some discomfortable task, your brain fires for avoidance. The amygdala just sets up in fire, and what's the easiest way to extinguish it? The erratic is the dopamine. That's the reason you scroll, swipe, and avoid a task you plan for future. So you're not doing it because you're lazy, but because your brain are wired to avoid pain, and this effort feels exactly like pain. Scientists Piers Steel put it forward like self-harm but a illusion of escape. And the philosopher Dark Ported tells us that sometimes we perceive our future selves like strangers, and there's even neurological evidence for this. So the people with the high rates of procrastination actually report much lower level of theory of mind. So basically, they have a much smaller neural overlap when imagining their future selves. So that's the reason they are much easier in avoiding the task and putting it up for their future selves. Though not all procrastination is created equal, psychologists widely identify two main types: the active procrastinators who delay the tasks intentionally, but actually thrive and accomplish them under the pressure, and the passive procrastinators, which delay them out of indecision and anxiety and often feel overwhelmed. But some research suggests that active procrastinators may actually have similar outcomes to the non-procrastinators in terms of performance, but unfortunately with the higher stress. Procrastination disproportionately affects people under pressure, and studies show that people under chronic financial stress experience so-called decision fatigue, meaning that they feel their mental resource severely depleted with the symptoms of lost self-control and forward planning. When your survival is a daily calculation, you have to pay rent, to secure your job, and to do anything but not to feel the system inequality. This long-term planning literally becomes a luxury, and the poorer you are, the more mental energy it takes to juggle these short-term crises. And the result is simply less resource for long-term thinking. So you scroll, you delay, and you avoid. The research of Dr. Tim Pychyl in Colorado University reframed procrastination from time management problem to an emotional regulation one, meaning that by procrastinating, you're not avoiding the task, but avoiding the emotions connected to it, like boredom, anxiety, or self-doubt. However, for someone, the procrastination is a good way to protect her self-esteem, because obviously, if you don't do the task, we can't fail. And that's proved to be true, because all the studies done on self-comparison or emotional awareness proves that these interventions are much more effective than the time management hacks. Some people are arguing that procrastination can serve as a good soul boost for creativity, like this intense pressure before the deadline is pretty good for a sudden insight. And there are research to support that. Like, procrastinators are actually more efficient in a short-term pressure task, but it's not a good win, because you basically win in the price of stress, fractured self-trust, and probably some more anxiety. Chronic procrastinators are much more prone to even cardiovascular disease, insomnia, and other stress-related diseases. A 2018 study in Germany just literally found the enlarged amygdala and dorsolateral or cingulate cortex, the part responsible for doing the right thing, but it's the harder thing, in people who procrastinate more often. So plainly, it means that they feel much more excited about starting the new tasks, and it seems much harder for them. So to put it plainly, it's just much more harder for them to start a new task and to stay in it more longer than usual, because they just simply feel more stressful about it. So it's just a way of gambling, but like they borrowed money. The same research in University of Colorado with students preparing for an exam deadline showed that if they were procrastinating for the first exam and after a mindfulness intervention forgave themselves for this procrastination, they were much more efficient at the next exam and were procrastinating less. So that shows us that the self-comparison, not the self-criticism, is actually helpful in such situations. Even some culture phenomena can help with it. For example, in Japan, the concept of kaizen, small continuous improvement, helps much people to minimize procrastination. It's part in culture, where action becomes habitual and not so monumental. In the Western culture, procrastination is often pathologized. So you probably will widely hear that you need more discipline, but studies show compassion, not discipline, to help people change. And today we're facing a new wave. Platforms designed to keep us endlessly entertained. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, not by accident, but by design, and attention is their currency. And if it's not enough to develop your cognitive boundaries, the procrastination can go from a habit to a life trajectory. Procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's an ancient instinct beyond your evolutionary system and amplified by the modern one. You're not actually avoiding the task itself, but the emotion associated with it. Maybe some inner critic. To beat procrastination, you don't have to become a superhuman. We just have to understand that the action doesn't come from motivation. It works just like the opposite. Motivation comes from action. So just start, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks. Because the future isn't something you're getting prepared for. It's something you build brick by brick, one action at a time. But it's built by these actions, one after the other. Tell your procrastination stories in the comments. And remember, the best time to start was yesterday, but the second best one is right now.